Imagine an African community living thousands of miles from Jerusalem, preserving a tradition that says our ancestors came from the Middle East. Now imagine scientists testing their DNA and finding something unexpected. Certain paternal lineages appeared to have Middle East connections. One particular Lemba clan had a high frequency of Y-chromosome pattern associated with Jewish priestly lineages. Was this proof? Did science finally solve the mystery of the so-called lost tribes of Israel? Or is it that the real story is much more complicated? Welcome back to Reclaiming Identity, Restoring History. Today we are going to Southern Africa. We are talking about the Lemba. And this story will challenge the way most of us think about DNA, ancestry, and identity. So who are the Lemba? The Lemba are a Bantu-speaking people living in Zimbabwe and South Africa. For generations, Lemba oral traditions have told stories of migration from a place called Sena. But what exactly was Sena? Different interpretations have associated it with different places, including areas in the Middle East and Africa. And this is our first lesson. Oral tradition can preserve a memory without always giving us a modern GPS coordinate. The word Lemberg comes from the word turban, or those who wear turbans. Some say that turban tradition comes from the Aaronic priestly headdress, a white linen that was worn by Hebrew priesthood. It signified purity. The Lemba also preserved traditions involving dietary restrictions, circumcision, marriage, and particular priestly or clan traditions. These similarities attracted attention of researchers, and then came DNA. In 2000, researchers did a study examining the Y-chromosome among Lemba populations. The researchers found that Lemba paternal lineages included both African and Semitic associated genetic components. Most famously, one Lemba clan had a relative high frequency of the Y-chromosome type known as the Cohen model haplotype. The Cohen model haplotype has been associated with some Jewish priestly lineages. That discovery generated enormous interest. Suddenly, headlines appeared suggesting DNA proves the Lemba are Jewish. But does DNA tell the whole story? A DNA test can tell us about genetic relationships. It can reveal population movements. It can identify genetic similarities. It can sometimes provide evidence of ancestry from particular populations. But the Lemba story is still fascinating because even when we separate the scientific claims from the cultural traditions, the Lemba story remains remarkable, and this is why. Because we have three different lines of inquiry: oral tradition, history, genetics. And they don't all tell us exactly the same thing, but they overlap in interesting ways. That's where serious historical investigation begins. Not with, I already know the answer, but with, what does each piece of evidence actually tell us? So identity is more than genetics. There is something I have come to understand through my own journey and my own research. Identity is not simply a percentage of a DNA report. You are not 12% culture, 20% history, and 68% DNA. Human identity does not work that way. Identity is built through family, language, tradition, geography, memory, faith, and ancestry. So DNA is one piece, a very powerful piece, but still only one piece. This begs the question, why are African stories always dismissed or have to be researched? And for instance, when Americans say they are Norwegian or they have British ancestry or German ancestry, they are not researched. What does this mean for African history? For me, the Lemba story demonstrates something profound. African history is not isolated history. Africa has always been connected to the wider world. People moved, ideas moved, languages moved, religions moved, genes moved, and cultures transformed as people encountered one another. So the question is not whether Africa had contact with the Middle East. Clearly, Africa and the Middle East have been connected geographically for thousands of years. The fascinating question is, which people moved where? When did they move? And what did they leave behind? And this brings us to our next mystery. Because the Lemba are not the only African community associated with Israelite ancestry. A lot of Bantu tribes tell the same story. Thousands of miles away in West Africa, there is another major population that has developed its own powerful connection to the story of ancient Israel. And that's the Igbo of Nigeria. Where did their Hebrew traditions come from? That's what we will investigate next. Of course, there are many other tribes, the Kikuyu, the Embu. So if you enjoy this story, like, subscribe and share. Because the deeper we look, the more complicated and the more fascinating the story becomes. Reclaiming identity and restoring history. My name is Mumbi Mugambi, and thank you for tuning in. Tayo, peace.